Someone we partnered with cut their own salary to fund their Google ads. Then they asked us, when can I afford to pay myself more? When can I give myself a raise? And should that be a raise or should it be a bonus? It's one of the most common questions that we get. So I'm going to tell you the framework that we use, the 4 steps to figure out when you can pay yourself more and also how to pay yourself, what form that should take. But first of all, let's just talk about the problem with kind of the mindset of I'll pay myself whatever's left in the business. This is a super common mindset that we see in practice owners. I'm going to put all my money into the practice, I'm going to reinvest, and then whatever's left, I'll pay myself with that. Now, if you are independently wealthy, that works. But for most people, that does not work, right? Because we do need to pay ourselves, and the business needs the tension of you paying yourself a reasonable amount to make sure it's profitable as well. If you're paying yourself a super low amount every month, you're allowing the business to run on smaller margins than it really could be and should be. So oftentimes practice owners will pay themselves last. Maybe they'll pay themselves inconsistently. And like I said, this allows the business to be in a less healthy place than it could be if you are forcing it to support you. It also creates financial stress for you as the owner. All that personal finance cost is having to get taken up from somewhere, right? And oftentimes that creates more stress for you as the practice owner. And again, if the business can't pay you consistently, that's not a sacrifice that you're making. That's a signal. It's a signal that something is not right and that the margins are not working. Don't take that personally. Take it as we need to change the equation around to make this practice more profitable. So now that we've talked about that, let's talk about the ways you can pay yourself. Okay. How can you actually take that pay? Number one, you can take it as a W-2 salary or pay. If you elect as an S corporation, which we can do a whole nother video on that, but if you elect as an S corp, which I'd say 80% of the businesses that we work with are S corps, you do need to pay yourself a reasonable salary, and that does need to come through payroll. That means you're running it through a payroll company. Taxes are getting withheld from that. It's the real deal. It's not you just transferring money. It's actually running that through payroll, taxes getting withheld. And just aside, there's so many great payroll companies right now that are so software heavy. Don't go old school and have someone manually calculating this. Go work with a payroll company, have them run all of it for you, file your state taxes, withhold those taxes, handle everything for you, because there's just a lot to manage there. So if you have somebody in-house or a CPA who's just doing that manually, there's oftentimes a higher risk of error with that. But that's the first option of how you can pay yourself if you are an S corp is you do need that W-2 pay to be there. The IRS says it needs to be a reasonable salary, which means you need to pay yourself reasonably for the work you're doing as an employee in the business. A little bit of a longer conversation. Talk to your CPA or consultant about that. The other way you can pay yourself is as a distribution. Distribution just means it's money leaving the business. So this can be a bank transfer. It can be a check. It can be you literally withdrawing cash from the business. That's a distribution. Distribution does not affect the profit in the business. It's not going to show up on your profit and loss. And because of that, it sometimes can be a little hidden in your numbers. If you are not taxed as an S corp, so say you're an LLC taxed as a sole proprietor or a partnership, a distribution is usually the only way you pay yourself. If you are taxed as an S corp, you also can still take distributions. You just also need that W-2 portion to still be there. So you want that kind of baseline salary to be there for that reasonable compensation, and then those distributions can be there as well. Oftentimes we would say, try to pay yourself a reasonable salary for the work you're doing as an employee. So if you're a therapist, pay yourself for the work you're doing as a therapist. For the sessions, pay yourself at your normal rate for that. And then pay yourself a distribution for those other things that you're doing and to kind of fill the gap that you might have on your personal finances for your pay. So it's kind of a mix there. That's a longer conversation. And at the end, I'll tell you about a way we can help talk through that. So salaries, distribution, those are the 2 ways you are going to pay yourself if you're thinking about how can I increase my pay and give myself a little bit of a pay bump. But maybe more importantly, let's talk about the framework that we use and the framework you can use for when to pay yourself more, right? We, as business owners, probably have all asked ourselves that question. When can I actually give myself a pay bump? When can I increase my pay and pay myself more closely to what I expected when I started the business? Oftentimes we pay ourselves very low, very minimal, and that's not good. It's allowing the business to operate at a lower margin than it should, and it's allowing you to kind of take on that personal financial stress. So here's the framework. Step number one, you just want to figure out your cash flow, right? Is your payroll actually going to be covered in the next 6 weeks, or maybe the next 3 pay periods if you pay yourself more? So kind of keep track. When I run payroll, how much money is left in that account after I run it? Is there room there for me to add on, $1,000 a pay period, or whatever increase you're trying to make? So if we take this, is our payroll going to be covered? And that kind of gets into the last video that I made, which is also just, do we have cash reserves, or are we really operating at a tight space where there's no cash left over? If you're running payroll, there's nothing left in the account, you're having to move money around every single day, this is probably not the time to bump that pay, because all that's going to do is make that problem worse. If you have some cash reserves, even if it's only a couple weeks, and if your payroll is easily covered, right, where you have the money there, you can move things around, that's the first condition to meet, is like, what does our cash flow look like, and do we have some margin there to bump up that pay? Step number 2, if you're running profit first, which I do recommend, are your profit first allocations hitting their targets? We'll do another video on profit first specifically, but profit first is going to mean that you're moving cash around into different accounts to cover different things. So you'll have a payroll account, and you'll be allocating a certain percentage of your revenue into that payroll account to pay for payroll. So if that allocation is not enough, right? If you're consistently having to pull from a different account to cover your payroll, then this is probably, again, not the time to pay yourself more. If you're moving the money there's money left over, or if you have money from a different account, where there's maybe you have a savings account that's now kind of met its goal, you can pull a couple percentage points from there. You can move your allocations around to allow yourself that room to pay yourself a little bit more and add a little bit more into that payroll account. It's basically a thought of, if I'm setting aside 60% of revenue right now for payroll, if I set aside 64%, will I have enough cash to go around and cover everything else I need to cover? That's kind of the thought you're thinking through. Step number 3, think about your revenue. Is your revenue growing, or is it kind of plateaued? If your revenue is continuing to grow, there's plenty of clients coming in, the pipeline's healthy, you have the capacity in your therapist to take on more clients, this could be a good time to be thinking about giving yourself that pay increase. If revenue has really stagnated or it's decreasing, again, this is probably not the time. And step 4, this is a very important one. Are you hitting your profit margin targets? Now, for a private practice, I would say a minimum to even be having this conversation, you probably want to be thinking about at least 10% profit. If you're hitting 10% profit, that means you're generally in a healthy range. We'd like it to be higher. 15% would be great, 20% would be even better. But if you're hitting 10% profit margin, that at least means you have some cash flow, you have some profit flowing through the business, and there's probably some room for you to give yourself that pay increase. So if all 4 of these are a yes, or at least are close to a yes, then I think you can think through the conversation of like, all right, cool, we are ready to think about this, to prepare for this. And then it's really a question of running the numbers to figure out how much of a pay increase to give yourself. So just to review, the multiple ways of paying yourself, right? We have the W-2 versus the distributions. We have the framework that we talked about, the 4 steps of when you can pay yourself, and also just the overarching theme of you should pay yourself more. We do want you to pay yourself more. I know those steps I just went through, those might feel difficult to cover or difficult to get to. But if you're not hitting those, it means the business is not financially healthy enough to pay you. It's not you're good at this or you're bad at this. It's just a matter of the business is not yet at a place where it can pay you more. And let's work on getting it there so that you now can pay yourself more. So that's the framework there. That's super important. That initial question from the client was, can I give myself a pay increase? And then if I do, should I give myself a raise or should I give myself a bonus? There's a lot of pieces kind of tied up in that. But I think as owners, we always want to be slowly building up our base pay. So ideally, you would give yourself a raise and just increase that monthly amount you're giving yourself. A bonus, that's going to get taxed differently. Maybe when they're asking that question, they're even just thinking like, can I just take a larger distribution one month? And that's definitely possible too. That's helpful if your revenue is kind of varying, or if you just had a really good quarter, you have a lot of cash left over, maybe you want to distribute out some of that. Both are important, but I think you want to do both together. You want to keep raising that base pay so that your monthly amount keeps increasing, plus you can give out some of those higher distributions or bonuses from time to time. So here's my offer to help. If you're thinking through this feels like a lot. You're not sure how to structure a compensation plan for yourself. I have a link below this video. You can schedule a consult call with me, do a 30-minute consult call for free. We can talk through how to pay yourself, what you should pay yourself, and how to do that pay raise. This is only for private practice owners. So if you're not a private practice owner, please don't schedule that. We'll remove it right off the calendar. I'm sorry. So if you're a private practice owner and you'd like to talk through your owner's compensation, how to set that up, how to pay yourself more, how to structure that, hit that link and we'll talk through and get this sorted out for you.